Okay, I think we'll get started. People will start to log on slowly, but we'll get started in the meantime. Welcome everyone to Knowledge Bytes Series 4. It's been a while since we've seen you, some of you, those of you who've been to our Knowledge Bytes in the past. Welcome back. Of course, I'm sure we've got some new folks joining us as well. So welcome to Knowledge Bytes. Basically, the reason we set up Knowledge Bytes was to give a little bit of learning to our clients and our potential clients, and get them to see some of our faculty in action, get them to understand some of the issues that are happening, especially in the wonderful world that we're living in at the moment. And who better to start Series 4 than Graeme Codrington. So I'll give a quick introduction to Graeme, and then Graeme will get started. Graeme is actually a futurist. He's an expert on the future of work. He's the author of 6 books, the CEO of a strategic insights firm called Tomorrow Today Global, and he has worked in over 100 countries with organizations from every industry and every sector. And I've had the privilege of knowing Graeme now for 10 years, working with him in my previous life and of course now at Emeritus. Always a delight to hear from Graeme. He's based in South Africa, so he joins us 3.5 hours away from Mumbai today. Welcome, Graeme, and we really look forward to your session.
Thank you, Joey. And it would have been much better if you and I would be in the same room. I really enjoy working with you. And this is the new reality, isn't it, as we all get online. So welcome to this season 4 of Knowledge Bytes, and it's great to be kicking off. As Joey said, I'm an expert on the future of work. That's my passion. I've tried to analyze the forces that are shaping the world of work. And over the last 20 years, I've tried to help clients all around the world to anticipate disruption and then prepare for it today, to work out what might happen tomorrow and what are some of the scenarios for disruption and how we deal with it today. And that, of course, is the theme of the 2020s. We've been saying for probably the last 15 years or so that the 2020s was going to be one of the most disruptive decades of all time. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were putting together the building blocks for deep disruptive change in society, in our economies, in politics, in technology, and in every single industry. So what I want to talk today in today's Knowledge Bytes is not about COVID. Of course, COVID is a massive disruptor that's shaken our world in a variety of ways. But I want to talk about the fact that the rest of the 2020s is going to continue to be just as disruptive. And if we think about the world of work and the future of work, if we had had this conversation a year ago, we would have been talking about the disruptors of artificial intelligence and automation and robotics and machine learning and cloud and mobility. We might have been talking about the disruptors, depending on the industry that you're in, of sustainability and climate change and things in that area. We might have been talking about the disruptors of global geopolitics and shifts in trade alliances, Brexit and the US-China trade war. In fact, there's a list as long as my arm of all the possible disruptors we could have been talking about. In fact, we were talking about them. Every single conference you've been to in the last 5 years has had these items on their list. And I think that what COVID has done for us is to accelerate, especially the digital disruptors. And so, yes, part of what we need to be doing in 2020 is to deal with the COVID disruption and to do what we need to do to get over the COVID crisis. But once the COVID crisis is dealt with, however long that takes, our team has a view. We think there's at least another year left of deep disruption, probably more like 18 months through to the end of 2021 before there's any return to what we might consider to be normal. And if it's going to take that long to be disrupted, then there's the real potential that there's no normal to go back to. I don't like the phrase, the new normal. I prefer to think of no normal as the new normal, because I think that significant changes will take place in politics, geopolitics, global systems, in our countries, in our societies, our communities, and significant changes will take place in the world of work that will be lasting legacies of COVID. And so we're not going back to normal. But even when COVID is history, however long it takes, maybe there's a miracle vaccine in the next few months, wouldn't that be brilliant? Whatever, however long it takes, by the middle of the 2020s, when COVID is just history, we are still going to be in a state of deep disruption. There's an obvious example, of course, that we can give here, and that is the work from home revolution that's taking place right now. As one of the biggest disruptors, probably we could phrase it slightly differently, one of the biggest experiments in the future of work ever undertaken. In fact, you know what? It's not really a work from home revolution or experiment, because a lot of you are struggling with this. You're not enjoying the work from home. I've worked from home for 20 years. Our company is 19 years old at the moment. We're in our 19th year, and we have never paid a cent in rental anywhere. Had more than 100 people work from us over multiple countries around the world, and we've been virtual all that time, and we love it. But most of you are not experiencing a built for purpose work from home environment. Many of you are trying to survive a crisis while stuck at home. You're either stuck alone, or you're stuck with someone you don't like, or you're stuck with your kids because they're not at school. And none of that is ideal. The real revolution taking place, I think, is the work from anywhere revolution. And I think that what's going to happen, one of the lasting legacies of COVID, is going to not necessarily be that we all work from home, but that our connection to the office is fundamentally and forever changed. Where maybe the default setting a year ago was you go to the office unless there's a compelling reason to not be there. And now in the future, it's going to be you can work from anywhere you like unless there's a compelling reason to get back to the office. I'm chatting to a number of people at the moment who are saying to me, oh, can't wait to get back to the office. Because of what I do for a living, I can sometimes be a bit cheeky about the questions I ask people. And I say to them, well, what are you missing about the office? What is it that's drawing you back to the office? And of course, the typical answer is, oh, I'm missing the human contact. I'm missing my team. I'm missing my colleagues. Of course, there's a great follow-up question, which is, a year ago, 8 months ago, back at the office, how often did you connect with your colleagues? How much connection did you actually have at the office? And when you think about it, I think we've already started to romanticize what the office was for us. And here's the point I'm trying to make. If and when you start to get back to the office, don't just go back to the office and do the things at the office that you used to do. Think about what it is you really are missing, what it is would really make a good office environment, and build that now. That's just an example. It's the most obvious example. I'm sure there's nothing new in the example I'm giving you, except the example's less important than the mindset I'm trying to get you to think about. You see, I would like you to think about, how do we reimagine our world of work? How do we just not fall back into the old patterns once the COVID crisis is open? How do we accept the invitation that the COVID crisis might be giving us to completely reimagine various aspects of our work? In this example, the office environment. The office environment was not as great as most people make it out to be. And the things you're missing, often you weren't actually getting at the office anyway. So now you can build that. There are some great examples of people who are using the COVID crisis to reimagine what they do. And this is really what I am trying to help my clients to work with at the moment. I'm not a crisis manager. I'm not helping people get through the crisis. I'm helping people accept the invitation the crisis gives them to reimagine what the future of work might look like. And one of my favorite examples is actually a country. Barbados has recently announced that they are creating a little COVID bubble on Barbados, one of the Caribbean islands, and they are making sure that anybody who arrives goes through a 14-day quarantine, guaranteed COVID-free. The whole island's COVID-free. If you arrive as a visitor to Barbados, they will give you a 1-year visa. They will also set you up with data and connectivity. And their invitation to you is, if you can work from anywhere, why not work from Barbados? I mean, you can't do better than that, can you, as an offer? And they're saying, well, come along, come to Barbados. We'll make it easy for you to live here. We'll make it easy for you to work from here. And of course, that's a way for them to deal with the fact that their tourism industry has been decimated. I love that thinking. And if I didn't have a family, don't tell my family, I think I might be on one of the first flights available to Barbados. What a great idea. Now, of course, if you begin to think this way, you can imagine immediately how the world is going to change dramatically. If our working patterns shift, even if it just goes to being a bit more flexy, going into the office only sometimes, well, then the whole rush hour commute is going to change. The whole demand patterns for public transport, the whole demand patterns for the automobile industry will change. If we are going to see empty offices as norms, then we're going to be negotiating with our landlords, reducing our rentals, reallocating spaces. This will impact the construction industry. If it impacts our the ownership of buildings and our landlords, then that might reduce the pricing on not only construction, but property companies. And because property companies are a huge part of your retirement portfolios, if you've bought structured products. A minute ago, we were talking about seeing if maybe you wanted to spend a few months remote working on Barbados. And now I'm telling you that your retirement funding is in trouble. You see, this is the point. Is that the COVID disruption, this disruption that we are living with at the moment, is not just one thing. And it isn't just about lockdown and a global pandemic. The whole system is changing. There are so many parts of the system that we call work that are shifting at the moment that we have to spend time focusing in on how the whole system is changing. Now, in a second, I'm going to ask you to be a little bit interactive with me. I'm going to leave a few minutes at the end of this for question and answer, but I want you to actually interact with me in a moment. So if you don't have your mobile phone near you, please grab it and get it ready, because I'm going to use a Mentimeter to just do a quick poll in a moment. So please get that and join me. I would like your feedback on something. McKinsey did a bit of research a few weeks ago looking at the acceleration of digital transformation. I think this is one of the biggest trends we should be talking about. Once you're over the crisis of COVID, very quickly you need to shift your mind to the rest of the 2020s. And one of the biggest themes is going to be the acceleration of digital disruptive forces. And McKinsey put together a fantastic piece of research. I hope you can see that over my shoulder. Depending on the size of your screen, that graph might be a little bit small for you. But basically, McKinsey asked people during lockdown, so this was done during May and June, they asked people, what technologies are you using now during lockdown that you weren't using before? And the vertical axis over there is showing the new technologies that people are using. The horizontal axis is they ask people, are you likely to continue to use those new technologies after lockdown's over? And the further things are across that way, the more likely it is that people will use them. This thing up over here, the G there, that's telemedicine, which has had the biggest jump in usage. But there are other things like video conferences like we're doing now, online education, home delivery of restaurant food, online gaming, online TV streaming, all sorts of new technologies that people, not new in that they didn't exist before, but new in the fact that people hadn't used them before. So I would like you to tell me, what do you think are the technologies, the new technologies that people are using that are most likely to remain after lockdown. So we've used them during lockdown, and now we might remain. So if you've never used Mentimeter before, go to any browser, either on your computer or on your phone. Go to menti.com, menti.com, and your code is 493400. And I just need to make sure that it's all running. There we go. And some of you are answering already. So please go in and select from the items that I've given there. There are others. So if you're desperate to say something that I haven't listed, click on other. We can maybe pick that up. There we go. Thank you. Now I've got 4 or 5 of you already in here. Now, for those of you who'd like to see how cool this is, let me just share my screen here. You can see what I can see. Have a look at the screen here. So Mentimeter, for those of you who haven't used it, is a great little piece of software that allows us to do exactly what we're doing, which is to be live and interactive, where I'm basically seeing in real time what you guys are responding. So it looks as if video conferencing is the big one, streaming TV coming out there. Yeah, I've been binging on some of my Netflix series as well. Restaurant food delivery, that's also been something new for us in South Africa. A lot of our restaurants have been closed for people coming to sit in the restaurants, but their kitchens have been allowed to be open, and we've been able to collect food. So yeah, I mean, we've got about 75 of you already. Thank you for your contribution. I think that is probably close to what I would have thought, except I think I might have put telemedicine slightly higher. I think telemedicine is going to be one of the biggest lasting legacies, where we move quite quickly in our healthcare, pharmaceutical, medical space to doing quite a lot more online rather than face-to-face with our doctors and medical supplies. Thank you. Thanks for contributing to that. Don't go away from that page. I've got one more question to ask you in a moment. The point I'm trying to make in this little knowledge bite, and that's all we've got. We've just sort of got 20 minutes, and we'll have Q&A in a few minutes' time, is don't be sucked into dealing only with COVID right now. Yes, of course, you've got to get through the COVID crisis. Of course, there's a whole lot of stuff you and your business have to focus on now. But it's very easy to get sucked into this crisis mindset, short-term thinking, working day by day, week by week, only focusing on what you do now. There's a lot to do. There's also a lot of people who are they're doing what I call busy work. They're trying to look busy. Because you know, you're not at the office, you're at home, so you've got lots of emails, lots of messages, lots of Zoom calls, and we're all exhausted because of the stress of the situation that we're in. But when you think back of what you've done in the last day or the last week or the last month, you realize it's just crisis stuff, and you haven't thought yet about what will happen after what comes next. And that really is something we can't wait for. I'm very, very nervous that there will be a lot of organizations that survive the COVID crisis only to collapse in a heap before 2025, because the other disruptions coming our way, you've forgotten about them, and they will smack you even harder than the COVID crisis has. So I want one more thing in Mentimeter, please. So if you can have that Mentimeter ready in a second. I want to just share as I close a quote from Charles Darwin, going back over a century to the great founder of the theory of evolution. And in a moment, I'm going to put up a quote on the screen, a quote by Charles Darwin, and I would like you to complete the quote for me. It's literally one word that you have to fill in. And if you know the TV game show, it'll be fastest fingers first, right? And the quote is very, very simple. But I want you to go into Mentimeter and get ready for me. As soon as I hit enter, you will be able to. Now, I'm suddenly realizing I'm going to have to do 3 things at once to get this right. So if you're ready, here we go. Charles Darwin famously said, that it is the survival of the, go for it. Charles Darwin said it is survival of the, and you have, oh, it's counting down now. 5, 4, 3. I hope you've got your answer in 2, 1. Time's up. What did you say? Yeah, I think everybody. I love people who've got a sense of humor. It's survival of the goldfish. That's my favorite answer of the afternoon. Most of us would have put survival of the fittest, right? That's what your science teacher taught you at school. That's what I was taught, and it's wrong. Phone your school up, get a refund, because Charles Darwin never said that. In fact, he said exactly the opposite. We were all taught the wrong thing at school. It's bizarre. All around the world, everybody was taught the wrong thing. What he actually said was, it is not the strongest or the fittest or the sexiest or whatever. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. But who? It is the one that is most responsive to change. And that's where we find ourselves right now. We find ourselves at a moment in time where we could just focus our energies on surviving a crisis, or we could take an invitation that COVID has given us, the invitation of the greatest disruption any of us have ever experienced, to reimagine our businesses, our teams, our careers, our lives, reimagine them to be adaptive, to say, well, what are we needing to do in order to survive this crisis we're in? And then can we learn those skills, those habits, those mindsets? Can we change our systems, our processes, our organizational designs in order to make sure that when the next crisis comes, and the crisis after that, and the one after that, we are much more ready to deal with it. We're actually built as an organism that can adapt quickly. In fact, I'll go further, that actually enjoys the disruption and the change. That is what I think we should be doing right now. Once you're over the very, very crisis moment, the next thing you should be doing is building adaptability into your system. And Joey, in my mind, that's what's going to help us all to not just survive the COVID crisis, but survive the rest of the 2020s, and not just survive, but also thrive as well. And that's what I want to help people to do, is to think beyond just the crisis we're in at the moment, and to look ahead at the rest of the 2020s and even beyond that, and be ready for all of the disruptions that we know are coming, many of which I do believe are going to be just as disruptive as the COVID lockdown is right now. So obviously, I work with companies to help them think about what exactly that means. What are the things you do in terms of organizational structures, in terms of habits, in terms of skills? But the mindset change is the most important and very first thing that we all have to do. So I hope that people do that. Now, Joey, I know you've been watching the chat box. It's been going crazy while I've been talking, but I think there might be a few questions or comments. So let me know what I can respond to here.
Absolutely, Graeme. And actually, what I would like to do is welcome the audience to start asking more questions, because we have another 10 minutes of Graeme's time. So whatever you feel that you want him to cover in these next 10 minutes, please do let us know. In the meantime, Graeme, we have a question here. A question here that came up a little earlier in the session. With the advent of the virus, which doesn't seem to be in control for at least the next couple of years, a lot of focus is being put on robotics in services industry, for example, robots cooking in a meal in a restaurant. How do you think this will impact the general population?
You know what, that's a great question. And really, it's actually a really good example of what I'm trying to get companies to think about, because robotics were coming anyway. One of my biggest clients for the last few months during lockdown has been a company in South Africa that supplies automation equipment to the mines in South Africa. Obviously, we're a big mining country. And they have had a whole lot of proposals out over the last few years, and a lot of the mines have said, we're not really ready to automate yet. In the last few months, those mines have come back to them and say, help us automate faster. because the mines in South Africa have to keep physical distancing of their laborers. And so the mines that are automated, or at least semi-automated, have actually been able to keep working during lockdown. All the other mines have had to be closed. And I think that this is exactly what I'm thinking about, that in different parts of different industries, robotics was coming. And all that lockdown has done has accelerated it. So we can't look at COVID and say COVID caused automation. The automation was coming. I've been spending the last 10 years telling people automation was coming, and a lot of people looking at me and going, yeah, we agree. But everybody always thinking it's 2030s or 2040s. Now we know it's nearby. So how does that then impact us? I mean, this could take an hour to answer this question, but a simple answer is this. Personally, I believe that any part of your job which can be automated will be automated within the next decade. That's just the nature of how the world works and how things progress. But there are a whole lot of things that can't be automated. There are more things that can be automated than you think, but not everything can be automated. And so we've got to look as humans, we've got to look at our work environment, and we've got to ask, what can't be automated? Let's take a restaurant, for example. We can get an iPad to take my order. We can probably get a robot to make quite a lot of the food. We can certainly get robots to deliver the food and the drinks to our table. We can get machines to clean the restaurant. So what's left in a restaurant? Well, there's the experience. There's the ambiance. So you choose to go to some restaurants because the chef does the cooking in front of you. Those Japanese restaurants where it's actually an art form to prepare your food in front of you. And so we will choose to go to some restaurants because it's neat, it's clean, it's robotic driven. We get exactly the food we were hoping to get. McDonald's. Or we choose to go to a restaurant that gives us a human experience with an ambiance. There's a sommelier that asks us to pair which wine with that. There's a story that's told. There's live musicians. And that's the bit that we humans can do. Now, that's a restaurant. I could talk about that for IT departments, for HR departments, for marketing. Where's the human element that we can bring? Everything else is going to be automated. Great question.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions that are a little tied, so I'll ask you those together.
Go for it.
Abdul asks, what changes do you see in the manufacturing industry? But another question that you may answer in the same way is from Amish, how do shop floor manufacturing operations need to behave in such a disruptive phase, since work from anywhere won't be possible?
Yeah, exactly. So when you're looking at manufacturing, there's a few other things you've got to look at in terms of disruptors. One, let's think of supply chain. Some of your global supply chain has been hugely disrupted, and in the next few years, you might want to onshore or nearshore some of your supplies. So that's going to be a huge disruptor to your industry. Then, as you say, there are some jobs that can't be done from anywhere. If you're a retail shop or a factory, you can't work from home. You've got to be at the premises. And so, yeah, we've got to take into account that different industries will be impacted in different ways. But the mindset shift is the key thing. So my examples might not be the perfect examples for you in manufacturing today. Obviously we could chat directly about some of the scenarios we see for manufacturing. But the mindset shift is this. It's the question. What is happening during the lockdown or during the COVID crisis that might have a lasting legacy into the disruptors of the 2020s? And that's the key thing, Joey, I want people to understand, is that we can't spend the next few months only focused on dealing with the current crisis. The rest of the 2020s is going to be equally as disruptive. And so we might as well start now. We're as disrupted as we're ever going to be, so we might as well start now to ask the questions about what does that disruption look like for me, and how do I respond?
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Graeme. There's a question here that I think in your world and my world, Graeme, we're grappling with at the moment. David Holmes asks, I have a question about the education sector. Can online learning ever really beat classroom learning face-to-face with a teacher? And someone from HSBC also asks, linked to that, screen time is one big concern for online education. What's your view?
Yeah. In fact, I just put up a video on my YouTube channel just yesterday about this. I think that students at schools and universities and participants in corporate education programs are not going to just accept us going back into the classroom as it used to be. Yes, there is value in being face-to-face, except let's be honest, there are a lot of teachers who don't give you that value. So there's potential value about being in the room, being interactive, being engaging, but there's a lot of lecturers who don't do that. And I think that there are going to be a lot of lecturers and a lot of facilitators who look like they are from the 1960s because they're not going to change. I think what's going to happen, the lasting legacy in education, is going to be hybrid education. Joey, you know, you and I have worked together for 10 years. I've often asked clients whether I could send my information transfer piece, my data dump, if I can be rude to myself, if I can get my information transfer piece in advance via video. You know, what we've done today, we've got 10 minutes of Q&A with 20 minutes of talking. Why shouldn't we have recorded that 20 minutes of talking and everybody watch it in their own time in the last few days? And then we have 30 minutes of Q&A, because we're never going to get through all these questions. I can see there's even more coming in.
I told you.
And exactly, you know, and so I think that's going to be what I've wanted to do for the last 10 years, I think is going to become more popular. People are going to have become used to watching some videos. They don't want videos only always, but they will be prepared to watch a few videos in advance of a lecture. Then when they get to the lecture, and I think we'll abandon that word because it'll be a workshop, they'll say, okay, I've got the content now. Now what are we going to do? Make it worth my while to be face-to-face. And that's going to mean us as facilitators, we are going to have to up our game and make it worth people's while to be face-to-face. I don't think it's just a default setting that face-to-face is better, because you can't go at 1.5 speed, which is how I normally watch all my YouTube videos. You can't move faster than the person next to you if you've already got the content. So I think there's real value in online, but I think the future is hybrid.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, we're seeing that in our industry as well. Elizabeth is asking a question about banking, which will be relevant to a lot of folks who are signed in from HSBC today. How do you see all aspects of banking services evolving post-COVID? With regulations and the need for security, will all aspects of banking ever be truly digitized?
Sure. What a huge
Your
question.
thoughts?
All aspects of banking. You know, there's so much involved in banking. If you look at the retail side, those banks that are involved in cash are discovering just how little cash is being used during lockdown. So there's a massive issue on that side. I have a banking client who manages cash, and they just, yeah, there's no business for them at the moment. A lot of, and some of that is because many people who hadn't yet gone fully e-commerce for their retail, for their shopping, for their food, have now gone e-commerce and are discovering this is great. And so they've moved into the e-commerce space. What's then likely to happen is you will see a lot more competition around payment processing, credit card type environments, online transactional stuff, and a lot of that will impact the Forex world. So then if we go further than that, the fintechs are going to have a ball in the 2020s because this is the world they've been waiting for, a world that isn't physical, and where the digital space of blockchains and cryptocurrencies and so on become more commonly accepted. So I'm not sure it's directly related to what's happening during lockdown, but I think that millions of more people around the world have engaged with electronic transactions, and that will obviously push back against the banking system to digitize a little bit more. people not going into branches, people not connecting face-to-face with their wealth advisors, whichever aspect of banking you're talking about. So there is a definite acceleration towards digitization, and then the fintechs are coming for your lunch in the banking world. This is the 2020s is going to see, I think banking is going to be one of the industries that's changed the most in the next 10 years.
Yeah, we're seeing that. We're seeing that already. But Graeme, one of the questions I asked leading from that is which of the banks do you think has reacted the fastest, I guess, to disruption in general, let alone COVID?
That's an almost impossible question to answer because, you know, we're from so many different countries and different parts of the world and so on. I think in general, an answer to that question is that banks, smaller banks can respond faster than bigger banks. And I think that's been the case in many countries. And I think more than size, I think it's got to do with what the banks have done in the last 5 to 10 years to build adaptability into their system. So, I mean, it almost gives me a wonderful opportunity to summarize what I was trying to say. Because in most banking environments, right, information flows to where the authority is. So you've got your client advisors, you've got your customer relationship managers, and a lot of banks have moved to this in the last few years to get a lot closer to their clients than they used to be. But they've put people in charge of those relationships who don't actually have authority to make decisions. So they connect with the clients, they find out what the clients need, but they've got to then come back to some committee, whatever the correct label is in your particular bank. But there's some committee that has to then decide on whether we can actually do what the client is asking us to do. Then it's got to go to an exco or some finance committee or something. Then legal and compliance have to get involved. Then marketing wants to get involved to make sure that the renewed contract gets on the right Pantone color header. And then finally, it can be taken back to the client a few days or even weeks later, and probably not exactly what the client was looking for. And the reason for that is that most organizations, information which is available at the front end, information flows to where the authority is, which is at that senior executive committee. What we need to do to build adaptability is make sure that authority flows to where the information is. And that we need to build a system where the people, the frontline people who actually have the relationship and the information, also have the authority and the competence and expertise. I realize there's a bit of, you're not going to get this done by Friday, right? By tomorrow, this is going to take it some time. But if we're going to build adaptable systems and adaptable organizations, you have to push authority down in the system. And most banks are not doing that. Most banks are in fact doing the opposite. So the banks that have responded best are the banks that have given authority to their client managers to be able to engage with their clients in an adaptive and responsive way. And the banks that have to go through multiple layers of authorizations, and where the call center that you as a client actually phone to get something done, they cannot actually help you. And I could mention names, including the name of the bank that we bank with, who is represented in our participant list this afternoon, but I won't.
Okay, thank you, Graeme. So there's a little bit of learning for all you bankers online at the moment. Badisha asks a great question, which I think will be our wrap-up question. What are the key leadership skills which now leaders need to focus on in this hybrid world?
All of it can be summed up in a label, and that is adaptive leadership. And the best way to understand it is to compare and contrast it to the typical version of leadership that we know, which is a more command and control thing. And most leaders will swear blind they're not control freaks and all the rest. But a lot of leaders I know have been struggling now that their teams are working from home. We've had so many questions from our clients asking us, how do we measure productivity? How do we ensure everybody's working? And my response is, what are you thinking? You can't. It's impossible. Stop measuring inputs, start measuring outputs. Stop trying to control, start trying to lead. And what a lot of people think leadership is actually control. And their model of a leader in their head is the general on a horse in front of the army. It's the sports captain or the coach, shouting at the team. And I think that's an incorrect model for the world of VUCA disruption. And so if you've understood my point today of how much the world is changing and how much disruption is yet to come, then it should make sense that the key skill is the ability to adapt, the ability to adjust, to change, to be agile, flexible. And I know that you've set up a lovely series of knowledge bites, Joey, because that's where you guys are leading into to next week. But there's a whole skill set available around this concept of adaptive intelligence and adaptive leadership. And we could take the rest of the evening to talk about it. But for me, the biggest thing again is this mindset shift. What am I trying to do during COVID? Am I trying to get back to normal? I think that would be a problem. Am I trying to survive the crisis? Well, sure, you have to, but I think that's not enough. I think good leaders right now are saying, how do we accept the invitation that this COVID crisis has given us to reimagine how we do things so we're ready for any disruption that comes our way? And that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what I'm passionate about helping people to get right at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Graeme. We're getting a lot of very positive responses to the session today. Of course, as Graeme mentioned, this was just 30 minutes. Do get in touch with us if you want to have a longer session with Graeme. It sounds as though, based on some of the questions that were asked, people want to know more. We always want to know more, especially when we're talking to a futurist. So thank you, Graeme. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. As Graeme mentioned, next week we have Tremaine Dupree from one South African to another. Tremaine Dupree, who will be talking about decision-making and agility. So we look forward to seeing you on that session next week. Do get in touch with us at Emeritus if you want to learn more, both, of course, about Graeme and his background and what more we can do with him, but also with our other programs around the world. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Graeme.